It is with great sadness to announce the untimely passing of Public Service and Administration Minister Collins Chabane, who died in a car crash early this morning. The presidency has confirmed his passing. Chiefs suffered their first CAF defeat as Pirates shine in the Confederations Cup. That's your sports news. The Vatican says that force may be necessary to stop attacks by Islamic State militants. Well, let's have a look at other stories that are making headlines on other media platforms. Our SABC Radio Bulletins is currently running with the story.
Collins Chabane has died and hundreds to attend hip-hop star Flabber's funeral. Good morning, I am Zikona Miso. The presidency has confirmed that Public Service and Administration Minister Collins Chabane died in a car crash earlier this morning. President Jacob Zuma said in a statement that the government is deeply shocked by his untimely death.
Well, thank you for tuning in to another exciting edition of Media Monitor and welcoming us into your homes. Media Monitor is a platform where we discuss what makes news and why some issues have very little social impact, while others a very huge impact. This Sunday, as we always do, we intend to deepen your understanding of the role of the media in our democracy, while creating more awareness among TV viewers as well as radio listeners, including newspaper readers as well as users of news website and social media. Remember to be part of our discussions today. You can call us on the following numbers. It's +2 711 714 6843, 714 6847 or 714 6857. You can also interact with us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. A very good morning to you. Well, our guest this morning would like to welcome SABC Radio News editor, Ms. Rulani Baloyi, and of course from our Cape Town studios, Ms. Kiara Carter. She's the editor of the Weekend Argus panel. A very good morning to you, Rulani. Thank you for joining us here in studio.
Thank you, Alicia, for inviting me, and good morning to all the viewers at home.
Kiara in Cape Town, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Media Monitor.
Good morning.
All right, well, let's start by having a look at all the news that are making headlines in our newspapers today. The Sunday Independent is running with McBride declares war on Tleko. The Weekend Argus, a crowbar gang attacks a spread. The City Press, one day a child will die. It is the Sunday Times, of course, a dentist and, of course, a beautician score big Eskom deals. And, of course, the Sunday Mail there from Zimbabwe. Inside Chiku Ruby's Friday, the 13th riot. And, of course, that's the Sunday Express there from Lesotho saying, leaders snub the inauguration Nigeria Sunday. And of course, that's the Nigerian Sunday there. It says, trust Buhari will win the 2015 presidency. And of course, it is the Sunday Observer there. And as you can see, church leaders plot regime. And also the Sunday Tribune with law and disorder. All right, well, panel, let's start with discussing these headlines there. And we'll start with the Sunday Independent today. It says McBride declares war on Tleko. Well, apparently, Mr. McBride, Robert McBride, has launched a withering attack on Police Minister Nathi Tleko, of course, accusing him of, among others, contravening the Constitution, having improper and ulterior motives as to why he should be suspending him. Now, the issue here, panel, is, of course, what are the minister's powers really? We seem to not be getting this through on our mainstream media. We just seem to be just as confused. Let's start with you, Rulani.
Yeah, we know that on Friday, Mr. McBride went to the North Gauteng High Court to try stop the upcoming suspension, because he hasn't been suspended. He's just been given a notice that they're going to suspend him allegedly for tampering with the results of the probe into the illegal rendition of Zimbabweans in 2010. So everything goes back to the same story which led to the suspension of Hawks Head, Anwar Dramad, and the Gauteng Head, Shadrack Sibia. So it's all linked to the same problem that the police department seem to find itself in as we speak.
Kiara, your views this morning?
You see, I think central to this is that Parliament appoints Mr. McBride, or the IPED head, and what seems to be the case is the minister has the power to suspend or remove, which is a contradiction. And it's unclear how that contradiction is going to play out in this case. Mr. McBride is obviously challenging the entire process.
All right, let's move on to our next story. We will get to talk a little bit more about that on our segment later on. Let's move on to the Sunday Times. Now, the Sunday Times is leading with dentists and beauticians score big Eskom deals. Now, basically, dentist, it says, to add diesel to Eskom's woes. Sunday Times alleges that dentist Maxine Kekana and beautician Monica Nkosi are the beneficiaries of the diesel tender for Eskom. What do you make of these developments, especially after the suspensions on Friday? Let's start with you, Kiara.
Look, it's a great headline. They're not the only people supplying diesel to Eskom. They're additional suppliers to the kind of more normal, predictable ones. But it's obviously part of some of the issues that need to be unraveled in what's going on there. Because one of the big concerns is the amount being paid for diesel and quite why the cash flow is so bad at Eskom.
Rulani?
Yeah, I think, Alicia, we need to look at this, this story holistically. I mean, we've already been shocked by the suspensions on Wednesday. And the way the Minister of Public Enterprises is putting the story is that I and the board, we are frustrated but by not getting answers about operational issues. For example, the delays in bringing power plants like Medupi and Kusile online. I mean, remember the original deadline
Rulani,
for
we'll get into the crux of the story. I just want to hear your views about this particular headline today because we're going to discuss this in more depth later.
Okay, when we're talking about this particular headline, I think it's a very interesting headline, but for me, it's not really much to the goings at Eskom because, I mean, as Kiara said, that there's a lot of people who've been given tenders to supply diesel at Eskom, and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a beautician or a dentist, maybe you cannot qualify, but yeah, I mean, maybe we should say it should have been given to chemical engineers or people who've worked in the fuel industry. We don't know that.
Let's move on to the Weekend Argus there. And I want to ask the Weekend Argus's editor, Kiara, why did you lead with this headline? Tell us all about the Crowbar Gang attacks spread. Tell us more about this headline.
Oh, look, we're a local newspaper, so we're going to lead on local stories, preferably to the national stories that we'd put inside. And this is a local crime problem. There's been a gang of robbers who forced their way into homes amazingly quickly. They've been caught on camera, you know, on a CCTV camera a few times, breaking in. They were rampaging in the southern suburbs of Cape Town. Communities organized and increased security in their areas. So the gang seems to have now moved to the northern suburbs, which usually are less inclined to experience this kind of crime.
Rulani?
I think local crime in suburbs, I mean, we saw what happened to our colleagues, SABC News crew, on during the week on Tuesday. So I think crime in suburbs is becoming a very big problem, and I wonder if in South Africa we have enough metropolis to deal with smash and grabs and people who just pounce at traffic lights and in people's homes. It's a very big problem, and I don't know if we are any closer to dealing with an issue like this.
All right, let's move on now to the Sunday Tribune. It says law and disorder simply. Now, apparently, politics have split Durban City Cops into two. A spat between the top two cops at Durban's Metro Police Services has taken a political twist. Apparently, they're vying for the position there. What do you make of this story today, Rulan?
We're talking about police, and it becomes a problem if you have police not wanting to work together. Who's going to arrest who? And who's going to be left loose? You know, you can't have a police department or a metro police department where the police are not working together and they're dividing themselves into camps.
Kiara, your views?
Yes, I think that there's going to be an attempt to get metro police across the country to answer to National Police Commissioner ultimately. At the moment, they're very much regional and they're playing to provincial politics often, including in the Western Cape, in fact.
All right, and of course, we'll talk more about these papers, more on the inside stories when we come back. But stay tuned for more Media Monitor shortly after this break.
Nelson Mandela, that was for me having an opportunity to make a film about something he said. He's one of my heroes and he makes me proud to be African.
Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island and in other jails as a result of his struggle to end apartheid in South Africa before becoming the country's first black president in 1994.
So you make movies, like Spielberg?
Yeah, I make movies like Spielberg.
Join Musam Khalipi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Food for thought, in the words of Ray Davis. Remember, a challenge only becomes an obstacle when you bow to it.
Of dedication and perseverance, Abayani Maitakore made history as one of South Africa's best performing matriculants of 2014, attaining 7 distinctions.
I believe that nothing should stand in your way if you see yourself in the future doing something great. So I just carried on and I never gave up. Though the circumstances I faced were challenging, I love challenges, so I was like, yeah man, bring it on, I can do it.
Join me, Refiwe Muiba, on Bophelong, your show about those who take on and conquer life's challenges, every Saturday at 17:30.
Zoom into Africa. This is Seychelles. The president is Mr. James Michel James. Seychelles got independent from United Kingdom on 29 June in 1976. The population is over 80,000 people. One of the major languages spoken is English. Monetary unit is the Seychelles rupee.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Well, there are also other interesting stories that didn't necessarily make the front pages. Let's now have a look at them. The Sunday Times on page 2 says they stick to the shop floor. Zuma tells union leaders. Well, this one, President Zuma has lashed out at trade unionists, warning them to not act as politicians, but to stick to the matters of the floor. Rulani.
I agree with the president that there's a lot of boardroom politics playing out in COSATU. And the workers are suffering. I mean, as we're speaking, there's negotiations between unions and the Public Service Department about wage increases because the last agreement is coming to an end in April. So this is where COSATU should be focusing its muscle. And unfortunately, there's a lot of boardroom politics. I mean, if you had watched Mr. Dumodlamini yesterday at Moses Kotane's reburial yesterday, where he was appealing to the unions who didn't come to the CEC meeting and say, please come back. You can see he's a troubled man. I mean, if you're a captain and you are steering a ship that's sinking, you should be worried. And he's a worried man. He doesn't want to be remembered as someone under whose eye COSATU plunged into disarray.
Kiara, what are your views on this story?
Look, it's a complicated one in that by virtue of COSATU being part of the alliance, unionists have been involved in politics in the last 2 decades, and many of them have moved across from the federation, from their unions, into ANC politics, into parliament, into government, and so on. Obviously, at the moment, you've got some critical problems. One is the emergence of rival unions, the talk of NUMSA setting up its own party and going directly into politics, possibly in conflict with the ANC, one would assume so. And I think that many unionists had neglected shop floor issues. That's why we had the situation at Marikana, for example. Whether at this point anyone's going to listen, those who are in rebellion, and go back to just focusing on the shop floor, I kind of doubt. Wow. And Irvin Jim, I think, answered quite, I think in the Sunday Times article, was quite dismissive of President Zuma's comments.
We'll see more developments into that probably this week. But let's look at another big, interesting headline here. It's actually on page 7 of the City Press. It says, cash scandal hits the healthcare. And in relation also to the same, the City Press's page 4, public servants allegedly taking sick leave that is almost worth 27 billion rand. Let's start with the public health scandal. Now, according to City Press, public hospital bosses are allegedly tipping off lawyers for possible medical malpractice cases in their own hospitals in exchange for kickbacks. Rulan.
All I can say is that sometimes people do anything to make an extra buck. But we know that the health minister has been concerned about the medical negligence claims that public hospitals have been facing in the past few years, because every year millions of rand have to be paid to people who maybe claim medical malpractices from one hospital to the other. So this story is actually bigger than we think it is. I mean, remember earlier this year there was a story from the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital where it was said that nurses at the hospital were tipping mortuary owners when people died. By the time you go look for your relative, they've been taken by another funeral undertaker. So there's a lot of things that are happening in our hospitals which involve people getting money, unauthorized money, and it's just one of those that's very scary. Who do you trust? If the minister cannot trust the public servants who are supposed to be looking after the patients, who are selling information to medical lawyers, it's a very big problem.
Kiara, I mean, we've been reading about these exorbitant spendings. Just a few weeks ago, it was a story, an expose about consultants and how much they actually cost. Your views?
Look, the story is actually bizarre. If you think of senior officials at hospitals tipping off lawyers, I mean, it seems crazy. On the other hand, the minister I hugely respect, and I don't think he'd talk nonsense. He's got to have a reason for saying this. You know, in America, there's an absolute culture of this kind of medical malpractice suits. And in South Africa, that was less the case, but it seems to be increasing as the years wear on. And hopefully there'll be some kind of investigation. I mean, it seems extraordinary that people would do that.
Well, Kiara, it
against
says
their own hospital. You know?
Kiara, it says an investigation has already begun in Johannesburg, in Gauteng. So we'll definitely see what's going to happen there. What do you expect? What can we expect from this story moving forward with these allegations, Rulan?
I think in the meantime, the health department will be taken to the courts, and they'll be paying out civil claims, but also they have to look out at who are the culprits within the system and try and deal with it from internally. Because if the problem is starting internally, they have to get to the root of the problem.
All right, and of course we've just had the budget speech, Kiara. What do you think this says to, you know, the public spending in terms of how these monies are allocated?
Well, I mean, I suppose one has to put some money aside to cover this kind of expense, but you know, the other thing is if malpractice suits succeed, it obviously also points to some incompetence, not always avoidable, but pretty often avoidable within that healthcare sector. And moving towards, hopefully, a national health insurance system, we certainly need to get on top of the quality of care. The other concern is very basic things around health. You know, doctors tend to want to do cesareans rather than natural birth, precisely to minimize the risks of a malpractice suit. And that has to be of some kind of concern in terms of women's health, insurance health.
And while we're there, of course, the big question, Rulani, is the establishment of the ombuds for the health malpractice officers. What do you think this will do? Will this aid in any way with what is currently going on? Because it looks like it's just been left on its own accord.
I think this, to a certain extent, will help, because we're seeing a lot of highly qualified specialists in the medical industry either stopping to practice or maybe going to work in other countries. So we're losing a lot of highly qualified people because people are scared of being sued when they work in the public hospitals. So I really think the ombuds for the health professions, for the health professionals, it will be a good way to go for now.
All right, let's move on now to the Sunday Independent. Of course, it is page 10 and 11. It says Boko Haram welcomed by IS following a pledge of allegiance. Now, last week, Boko Haram sent out a pledge alleging to, pleading for allegiance with, you know, the Islamic State militants who have now apparently actually have said yes to that allegiance. What do you think this says now about, especially when we're talking about matters of national security, Rulani?
I think we should go back to the meeting which was held by the Peace and Security organ of the African Union end of January, which took a decision that the ECOWAS, the West African region, should have a team or maybe a force which has to deal with Boko Haram. To a certain extent, maybe this is just a way of trying to make sure that whatever the force that has been put together by the African Union in West Africa would not be able to do what it's supposed to do. And looking at the bigger picture, it might have an impact on the elections in Nigeria, which were postponed from February to the end of March. And this would have an impact because you can see that Boko Haram is relentlessly continuing with its attacks.
Kiara, I mean, is this really a threat to regional security?
Look, I think Boko Haram is a threat to regional security and a matter of grave concern in West Africa, not just Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad. What it means to pledge allegiance to the self-proclaimed Islamic State, it's less clear because IS are under pressure within Iraq. Obviously, they're being bombarded every day. They're also active in Libya. I can't see how the IS fighters could assist Boko Haram in West Africa in any meaningful way at this point. But there is a concern, and it is a concern of security.
But do you think that we are ready for this? If it's a serious concern and a threat, do you think we're ready for it, Rulani?
We can never be ready for any extra attack or anything like that. It's just a way how do world leaders, the United Nations, the African Union, how do they respond to these parties, the two militant groups wanting to work together? We can never be ready to deal with things like this, but it's how do we respond as things happen, or maybe now that we know that there is a plan to work together between the Islamic State and Boko Haram, we will be watching closely to see how the regional bodies, the African body, and of course the United Nations respond.
All right, and that's where we'll leave it with our newspapers. Those were the stories that didn't necessarily make front page news, but we'll have more Media Monitor after the short break. You can also go to our Twitter or Facebook accounts and comment on these stories that we've just gone through. We'll be back shortly after this.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
This is Media Monitor. Welcome back. Well, there's been mixed reports regarding the position of Arnold Ramat and Robert McBride in the police department. SABC journalist Nozintombi Mia interviewed Minister Ntleko. Let's see what they spoke about.
I don't know where the media got it from, that he resigned. All I said in the interview was that on the 24th of December, Mr. Ramat wrote to me. And in what he wrote to me, he also requested that consideration be given for him to take leave of his duties. Then there was a follow-up letter also sometime in January, which then led to a meeting between the two of us on the 29th of January to actually discuss the process around the question of his request. Now, and I realized that when I said that, the media then was spinning this thing the other way around. They then say, no, he has resigned. The fact is that that's a different process altogether.
Is that perhaps where the issue of the 20 million payout also came from?
I also do not know where that comes from.
Is he going to be getting a 20 million payout?
I also do not know as to how much he will actually get, except that the two legal teams have worked around a framework, for an example, in terms of an exit package and so forth. And all in it, the law is quite very clear. It stipulates the boundaries within which you can actually deal with matters of this particular nature and so on. So that's where it is really. But I think the 20 million was completely an invention by somebody who became so much novelish and creative and just threw that one in.
Mr. McBride has also entered the fray. I think there's a bit of confusion around what his role is and what he is attempting to do. Can you perhaps clarify that issue?
I do not know what the confusion is. Safe to say that IPID is an independent police investigative directorate. All it does is that it investigates cases that affect and that deal directly with the question of the police in their interface with the public, for instance, in the execution of their duties. Now, in the Founding Act, there is also provision that as and when, for instance, they would be running an investigation, if indeed they do come to a conclusion that there are prima facie kind of matters that would have to be followed up through prosecution, Section 7 of that Act enables them to refer the matter to the National Prosecuting Authority. I then wrote to Mr. McBride asking for explanations around this thing, and particularly because people who were supposed to cooperate, for instance, like investigators, people who actually wrote and penned that report, it's important to speak to them and so forth. So we instructed them not to cooperate with the investigation that I had commissioned and so forth. But still you have this kind of a situation which in a sense looks like it's a bit fluxy and so on. Yeah, it doesn't really tally, yes, that's a problem. So he submitted representations, in reaction to the in reaction to the letter that I had written to him and so forth. I then learned that I'm being taken to court by him on the basis that the court needed to decide or make a decision about what is then said or termed as a plan on my side to suspend him. Now, the fact of the matter is that nobody is suspended. He's not on suspension. And I think that's also quite important, because also the media was running this thing about a suspension. And I was wondering, where do they get it from? Because nobody is suspended.
I had heard about that.
Yeah. All I did was to say, look, explain some of these particular points, okay? And then on the basis of that, we'd then take the matter forward.
Well, that is, of course, Nozintombi Mia talking to Police Minister Nathi Nhleko. Do you feel, panel, that he actually addressed? But before we actually get into the questions there, let's take Douglas from Vereeniging on the line. Douglas, a very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead with your comment.
Morning, Jolly.
Morning, Douglas. Go ahead, sir.
Jolly, it's more like comments, not like questions.
Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Go ahead.
Okay, Jolly. The thing is with McBride, it's not surprising to hear about him, because when the political stories and they wanted to appoint him, there was a lot of people that said no to his appointment. But the ANC wouldn't listen to the other parties. They went ahead and just did what they wanted to do. So as far as I'm concerned, if there's anything, that guy is guilty. The other thing is, what was the other one that you spoke on, besides McBride?
All right.
You also spoke on...
Douglas, we've spoken about a lot of things today. We spoke about ESCOM as well. Is that what you're referring to, maybe?
ESCOM. The thing isn't funny there, because what's happening there, I think it's all underhandedness that's going on. It's all under the table. Money that's being flown.
All right, Douglas. All right, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Douglas, thank you so much for your time and your comments here on Media Monitor. Panel, let's discuss this. I mean, you've just heard the insert with the minister. Do you think that he addressed those issues? He's basically taking a swipe at the media here, saying that the media is just putting stuff that he himself is not even aware of in the public domain. Let's start with you in Cape Town. Go ahead.
Well, he came across very calmly and addressed some of the stuff like around Anwar Dramat leaving, and clarified the 20 million, and I don't know where that figure comes from either, I'm not sure. Around Robert McBride, well, clearly Robert has reason to think that his future is somewhat shaky if he's gone to court. But yeah, I think he did address some of the issues, the minister did.
Do you think he did?
I'm not sure where this goes from here, though. I think that it sounds as though Anwar Dramat is on his way out, and they're just negotiating the nuts and bolts of it. So maybe somebody was a bit premature in the announcement.
Thank you, Kiara. What do you think, Rulani?
I think Robert McBride went to court to say, I've been given a notice to suspend, a notice that I will be suspended. And remember, the way they do it is that before you are suspended, you need to give reasons why they shouldn't suspend you, because maybe they have preliminary doubts why they think you should be suspended. So the North Gauteng High Court on Wednesday will decide whether the suspension should be effected or not. But in the meantime, now we're seeing another body in the police department which is actually on shaky ground, because it's been the Hawks, and now we're seeing that the Gauteng Hawks boss is in the cold because he's already on suspension. And now if Robert McBride is found to have tampered with the results of the probe on the illegal rendition of Zimbabweans in 2010, then it's just a whole thing going on within the police departments, and we don't know who is next to be suspended in connection with this particular issue. And Robert McBride feels it's all political, and the minister thinks it's the right things to do. McBride has got questions to answer.
Kiara, we've just been speaking about, security matters. Now, many people are wondering if the recent developments in the security cluster don't actually pose a risk to the country's security. What do you think?
Well, I think that and it's not even just recent, it's over a period of time, some of the instability, particularly in the police, and the strange, and I don't think we've really unraveled it properly yet, goings on in crime intelligence, I think it does pose a risk. I think that it's bad for morale in the police force. I think that it means that the critical issues that policing should be tackling are kind of on the back burner, because your top guys and your next tier, all of them are tumbling, and then somebody else comes forward and runs it on an interim basis, and they're ousted. It's no way to govern in a country where there are very serious issues around crime that need to be tackled efficiently.
Let's take a look at some of the tweets, that our viewers have sent us from home. Siyabonga Seme says, shocking news of the passing away of Minister Collins Shabane. May his soul rest in peace indeed. Thank you so much, Siyabonga. President of Africa says, everything Zuma loyalists are doing to fight personal fights with our tax money is unconstitutional. Surely Nhleko will lose. Ntokozo Nineka says, McBride knows that these are games they play in government. He is no stranger to controversy himself. Rulani, you're laughing there. And I actually want to add weight to this point. Most media has surprisingly gone with the angle that the minister is just interfering in these matters to protect a certain individual, namely the president. But do you think that they've actually tried to dig out the real truth without having an already biased view as to what is really going on there, Rulani?
The thing is, unfortunately, Minister Nathi Nhleko took office. After he took office, then this thing started. And people are going to think maybe it's personal, him as the minister. And the question is, if somebody else was the police minister, we don't know if these things would have happened where you have people being suspended in the Hawks and in IPID. And of course, it's not only the media and the public who's concerned about the police minister. We saw when the president was in Parliament on Wednesday, the EFF leader, Mr. Julius Malema, he did raise this issue with the president, that we have a minister of police who seems to be suspending everybody. And we also don't understanding what is going on. But the minister was very clear, and he said, you know what, when I go to the Parliament's Portfolio Committee, I will address some of these issues. And with Arnold Ramad, he has been to Parliament and he's explained certain things which involve certain murders. And people are just thinking it's him being personal, but we don't really know the real story. We must remember that when we're dealing with crime intelligence, it's not easy to know everything about what's happening.
Yes, there's too many secret documents and, classified stuff that we'll never really get to, witness and also make an opinion there. Well, when Media Monitor returns, we analyze the suspension of the ESCOM executives. Be part of the conversation by calling us, tweeting us, and, of course, sending us emails. We'll be back shortly after this.
Nelson Mandela. That was, for me, having an opportunity to make a film about something he said. He's one of my heroes, and he makes me proud to be African.
Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island and in other jails as a result of his struggle to end apartheid in South Africa before becoming the country's first black president in 1994.
So you make movies, like Spielberg?
Yeah, I make movies like Spielberg.
Join Musam Khalipi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. Eskom Chief Executive Tsidi Somatona, along with Finance Director Tsulufelo Molefe, Group Capital Head Dan Marokane, and Commercial and Technology Executive Matsela Koko have been suspended for 3 months. Now, this is the time allocated for the inquiry. Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown claims that the executives would not automatically resume their jobs after the inquiry. So we're going to basically wait with bated breath for 3 months while this probe is going on to really find out why these people have been suspended. But this story sent shockwaves through South Africa's corporate world. But I think it's the big mystery here is why were they suspended? Kiara, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I think everyone's a bit bewildered. I think that the minister certainly, it's a precautionary suspension. There's no implication that those who've been suspended have done anything wrong, but it's while an investigation into perturbing aspects at Eskom takes place. And I think the minister felt cut off from what was really going on. She struggled to get reports on aspects like the cost of diesel and why they were spending so much. There's government obviously is perturbed by the power outages, the delays, which predates some of the officials who've been suspended, the delays at Medupi. It's a very complex matter, and I think there's a bit of a disjuncture, from what I can work out from reports, between the war room that's been set up under Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and the board of Eskom and the different planning that's occurring. But it certainly took the country by surprise. I think most members of the public are so fed up with what's happened that I don't think they care if everybody's heads roll. But certainly there's room for concern that this doesn't make matters worse rather than better. I'm not sure what you think.
Rulani, what do you think?
I was shocked on Wednesday when the announcement was made. Now we're busy dealing with we're going to be load shed any day or not load shed, and then, wow, four executives have to go. And the discussion that has been going on in social media is that people are saying, but the CEO has only been in the job for 6 months. He's been there since September. Why was he suspended with all the other people who've been in the company for quite a while? And remember when he was appointed to head Eskom, he was the Director General, so he was the accounting officer for the Public Enterprises Department, and he's also been a DG in the Department of Trade and Industry. So he's been around the state-owned enterprises for a while. So he knows the workings of how things are done there. But when you look at what the minister is saying is that we've been frustrated because people cannot give clear answers on when is Medupi coming online. Remember, Medupi was supposed to come online by 2012.
Yes. Unfortunately.
It's one of those issues. If the suspension is going to solve the issue of load shedding, I think this is what South Africans are worried about.
All right, and that's where we leave it with all our stories, our news stories this week. Let's now have a look at some entertainment news. Well, an amateur video shows a 95-year-old athlete, Dr. Charles Hals Juchster, breaking the world record for men's indoor 200-meter sprint for those over the age of 95 at the World Masters Athletics in Birmingham in England. Very quickly, Rulani, before we go, I just want you to comment very quickly on the passing of the minister there. I understand you've worked with him.
Yeah, I have actually met Minister Collins Chabane, and I found him to be he's one of those ministers who you can talk to. He's one of those ministers who listens, and he will be honest with you about what he thinks of the media. Very humble, I thought he would give honest opinions, very humorous at times, and I still can't believe that he's passed on. And I'm just so grateful that when I met him the last time, I said to him, you know, Minister, you did very well with arranging the funeral for our former statesman, Minister Nelson Mandela. You know, sometimes we don't get time to give compliments to people. And I said to him, this is for me what I will always remember you for. You did very well. With your media briefings, you're always spot on. And I remember saying to him, why did you say to people when they go to the union, to the union buildings to go and...
Let's leave it there, Rulani. Thank you so much, though, for sharing those memories there. Kiara, before we let you go, what do you think the Weekend Argus and other newspapers will be leading with this coming week?
In the week or next weekend?
In the following week. What do you think news will be making headlines this coming week, in general?
Well, certainly we'll be watching McBride. I'm convinced that Eskom will remain in the news. I think the post office will be back in the news. And obviously the death of Colin Shabani, I'm sure there's going to be a great deal written remembering the work he did.
And Flabba's girlfriend applying for bail tomorrow.
Rulani, what do you think will be making?
Yes, Flabba's girlfriend will be applying for bail tomorrow, and Flabba is being buried today, so we really are a nation in mourning. We will also be watching what the High Court in Pretoria will say about the McBride application, and of course we'll be watching developments with Minister Collins Chabane's passing.
Thank you so much, panel.
And good luck to the Proteas on Wednesday when they
pray. It is the do or die game.
Yes.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. Of course, let's have a look at that 95-year-old man who actually broke that record. Well done to that very brave 95-year-old there for breaking that record. That was a bit of entertainment news. We try, to just, leave you with a little bit of something fun so that you can just stay away a little bit from those serious news. Well, I was joined today by Miss Kiara Carter, who is the editor of the Weekend Argus, as well as our very own Miss Rulani Baloyi. She's a radio news editor right here at SABC Radio. Now, our viewers, always remember that your contributions and suggestions are highly valued. To engage with us, you can follow us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. Share your views and comments on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/Media Monitor and tick like on our page. You can also email us your views about the show. The email address is mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. Once again, thank you so much for watching Media Monitor. Do join us again next week, and in case you missed this live show, remember you can still catch the repeat tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. Alternatively, go to our SABC YouTube link on www.youtube.com/SABC News. For myself, Alicia Jada, and the rest of the QTIV team, you have yourself a blessed Sunday. Goodbye.